just realizing like, oh, we're doing this thing together, and we're in this together, and like we're excited to figure it out together.
That was really refreshing to be in a situation where I didn't feel like I had to pretend like I had all the answers.
There was a sense of like childlike play. Did we all just become best friends?
Hey friends, welcome to the Dreams of Education podcast with me, Kelly Tankley, and my friend and coworker,
Michelle Baldwin.
Yay! So why are we doing a podcast, Michelle? Because truthfully, the world probably doesn't need another podcast. Why did I convince you to do this with me?
I think we have some really good stories. And as you've said before, we both have this innate need to share things that we learn so that other people can know that also. And it's not like we're hoarding information, that we want to make sure that, hey, I just found this really cool thing or this really neat idea, and maybe you want to know it too.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about how you and I are both kind of natural sharers. And there's nothing I hate more than when somebody has information that would be very useful for me and they don't share it, and they just either assume that I already know, or maybe they don't want to be condescending, or maybe the ego is like, the pride is, I don't want to share because, you might be competition or whatever. But both of us are so different than that. We love to like, let me tell you about this thing that could make your life better. And so hopefully some of the stories that we'll share and things that we've learned along the way will be helpful to other people. But if you're wondering who in the world we are, I started a school in 2011 at age 28, which I only mention because it plays into the story later. But really, we have learned so much over the last 14 years of running a super innovative and very learner-centered school model. And so we've learned a lot of lessons the hard way over the years, but I think we did a lot right also.
Oh, for sure.
We stumbled into things that it's only now that I'm like finding the research that supports the thing we've been doing, which is kind of fun, but also like, oh, intuitively there was something here that was resonating, that we just intuitively knew was the right thing to do. So, here we are 14 years in, and we have time to do this right now because we just got through maybe the hardest year of certainly of the school, maybe of my life. Like it was a hard year. And so we got through a year where everything that could go wrong felt like it was going wrong in spectacular fashion. And we found ourselves in February without a building for our school. We've always leased space. And our leased space suddenly was causing people to become very ill. And the air quality was terrible. And so we had to leave mid-year and find a new home for our school to finish the year, which was an adventure in and of itself. We taught out of libraries and rec centers for a couple weeks. And then we're grateful to have a school open up their doors to us and allow us to just finish the year with them. They had some extra classroom space. And that was a learning experience as well. I think both of us, it was just interesting to see Anastasis within another model. But then looking for buildings and a location for this school year, and we just couldn't do it in the time to open it.
Not to do it right.
Not to do it right. And also, truthfully, we live in this like pocket in Colorado, or the school is located in this pocket of Colorado where there are so truly few choices. And so, we ended up kind of in this space where it's like, okay, well, now what? And so we're taking a pause year and looking for how do we do this next? Almost using it, as you said, like a reset of who we are, but also like, how do we kind of tell all these stories and remember all of the good and kind of use that as forward momentum for what the next iteration looks like, hopefully after this pause year. So,
and I really think like we spend so much time helping students learn how to be reflective and families learn how to be reflective that it actually feels kind of like a welcome opportunity to, okay, let's go back and reflect on all of the things that we've done so far. What really worked well? What did, like we said, you did before, what did we do intuitively that we didn't know was the right thing to do? But that reflection piece is so vital for learning that I'm very grateful for that opportunity as well.
I'm excited about it now. I'll be honest. I wrote a blog post on my Dreams of Education blog, and it was, a series of unfortunate events. And it was right when all of it felt like it felt like failure. You were kind it to be the voice in my ear saying, like, this isn't failure. It's a lot of things have gone wrong all at the same time. But it really feels like failure when things are falling apart and you're the leader who can't figure out how to make it work. And we talk all the time from day one with our kids about failure and how failure is a teacher. It's part of our code, for crying out loud. And even in those moments, it was like, it's easy to talk about failure when you're talking with kids and the failure, perspective wise, from the adult perspective, feels like small, manageable things. But when you're in the failure, you forget like the embarrassment and the frustration and the heartache and the like all of the emotion that gets attached to it. And even knowing it's not the end still feels pretty final when you're going through it.
For sure. And when you stop to think about how much of yourself that you pour into this, it's very difficult not to take it personally. And when you take it personally, all those emotions kind of start getting wrapped up in there, and then failing feels awful.
Yeah.
And so again, we can give this as a lesson and be an example for students, but also for ourselves, just to remind ourselves that, okay, it isn't personal what happened, right?
Well, and the grace to step back and just, like you're saying, what can I learn in this moment? How can this be a teacher? How do I allow this to be a time of reflection and healing and all of the things? And I was telling you off camera or off the record how it's been a time where I've really realized how much of myself I feel like has been like of my just deepest personality, like what's truest about me. I haven't felt like myself for the last few years, certainly probably since 2020. But when you're in it, it's hard you don't have enough distance to realize that that's happened.
Right.
And so it's not until I have kind of the space to breathe that I'm realizing like, oh, this was probably really important, that we have time to go back and remember, one, what we've done, but also the lessons that we've learned along the way. And the reflection, I think, is going to be important.
If we go back to that whole thing about our identity is wrapped up in what we do, but then we always have to do more to be more. And I wish I remembered who said that, because that
I know it was so good.
And actually, this is a really great kind of like conclusion for this introduction part, is that we think about our identity so much of who we are, and that's how we start our school year. But sometimes we get lost with our identity and what we're doing, and we forget to go back to like, who am I actually, and what do I value? And is any of that happening right now, or have I kind of gone off course because of other events that have kind of pulled me back from my ideal identity?
Yeah. Well, and how much of the cultural zeitgeist gets in there, even when you're not, even when you're trying to distance yourself from it, like the idea of America being such like a hustle culture, it does, a lot of our identity is based around what we do. And, are we hustling? Are we doing everything? And especially in that like startup entrepreneurial spirit, that culture is so prevalent. And you think that you're not getting sucked into it, but in those moments when it's falling apart, you're like, well, clearly I got sucked into it. Like it's somewhere still in there defining who I am or how it's going or, all those things. So, it's nice to have a breath from it.
And we know how important rest is. We see it in, in seasonal changes. There are so many metaphors if we look for them around us. And that, I think that's something as I've gotten older and maybe wiser, I don't think so, that I've really learned if I, whatever, if I don't rest, my body takes over and says, no, you're resting now. And why do we force that? We need to make time for that. It is as important as the work. And sometimes, more so.
And what is the rest? We should do a whole something about that, because what does the rest look like? Because if you had asked me, I would have thought I was taking care incrementally of that rest, like weekly. But I don't think I could ever separate enough from it that was fully true.
I think a lot of teachers would say that. A lot of educational leaders would also say the same thing, because we do get more wrapped up in our work. I know that sometimes there's a big push for teachers to remember that this is a job. You have to be a whole person outside of this job as well. But that's really hard when your job is people.
Yeah. Well, and this is such a lame example, but it's so true of every year that I've been an educator. I've been very mindful about, like, when I leave the house, if I run into a student, am I okay with them seeing me? So I would change 10 times before we left the house. And my husband's always like, you are allowed to be a full person who just wears, cut off jeans and whatever. Like, you're allowed to be a full person. But even something like that thought, I might be on a break or a relax or whatever, but I'm still thinking about my role in that way. So it's not truly like separate. But given this time, and I'm leaving the house in workout gear pretty much daily right now.
Oh my goodness. Oh, shock. Oops.
I know. The horror. So, all that to say, that's why we're here and that's what we're doing. But I thought it might be fun for us to time travel a little bit, like cue the Wayne's World. I thought it might be fun to time travel back to right before we started Anastasis, because like how we even know each other is kind of random and funny as the story unfolded. And so I thought if we could go back to 2010 and think about what was happening in your life in 2010. How was your thinking? Like, what was your role in education? How were you thinking about things? What were you doing as a regular practice within education that kind of opened you maybe to the possibility of stepping into the unknown?
So I had been in the role of technology staff development coordinator for, I think, 6 years. And so I was basically teaching teachers and other school staff, and also coordinating others to teach them technology. The school district that I worked, or where I worked, had initiatives all the times that they would, pay people to go and take training classes so that they knew how to use the software or whatever devices that they'd be using with kids. And I did that, like I said, for 6 years, and I missed being with kids. So I'd gone back into the classroom. And in 2010, I was starting my second year back in the classroom as an elementary music teacher. And I'd only ever taught high school and junior high vocal music before that. And I remember it was actually lovely. And I really enjoyed being that person in the school that kids could come to after like they were doing testing. And they're like, oh, we're so glad. Can we just listen to lullabies today? Because they were worn out, right? But I could still just see something. I saw it in my own kids when they were going through school. We kind of lost the whole personality of the kids, and they became students, and they were data points. And I remember going to a lot of meetings and, professional learning community options, and they were always talking about the data. And I was like, what about the kids? And I kind of broke my heart a little bit, but also I was a little disenchanted, I think, in education. So I didn't know what I was going to do because I didn't think I could continue where I was. There were some rumors of maybe going into standardized testing for music and PE. And I was like, absolutely not. I will not do that. I know. Like, I have kindergartners playing, xylophones and drums and singing all at the same time. How are you going to standardize test that? Anyway,
seriously.
And I don't know that they ever did that. It may have just been a rumor, but I did just see too much happening that I felt was not in the best interest of kids. And that it wasn't that particular school or that district. It was all around. So that, no shade to that other school district, but I really was looking for something different. And I had, read your blogs. I'd seen you on Twitter. You and I were like talking and there were things that we had in common that I was like, okay, this is a person who gets it.
I think it was probably because I was also in 2010, I had just left the classroom and I left for health reasons. I was a technology integration specialist and had done that for 7 years and was doing a lot of the same like professional development type things around technology. And so probably we had some overlaps there to begin with that kind of like it was why we started talking or following each other on Twitter or whatever to begin with. But it was kind of like a magical time in education, or maybe it's just like whenever you think about yourself at that age, you think about it in kind of rosy terms, but it felt so like just the right time for so many things were happening at once where you could connect with educators around the world who you didn't necessarily know in really meaningful ways through blogs and Twitter, because it wasn't so like inundated with, you could read all of Twitter in one day, like you could get through who you followed in one day and there was no advertising and there was no, like all of those like marketing pieces hadn't entered. There weren't like influencers as we know them today. So it was like this wide open space where you could really connect meaningfully with people. And so that probably was how we did it initially, was through the tech piece. We were probably following similar people and talking about that sort of thing.
It was like the cusp of Web 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I brought on all of these new opportunities, and schools were just starting to get, well, should we blog with our kids? Should we do these things on social media? And, back at that point, even things like Facebook were still pretty new to people who hadn't been at a university. So there were all of these things that were kind of just thrust in our faces very quickly. And there were certain communities, education being one of them, that really glommed onto that and said, hey, look at how we can use this. Skyping with scientists or other classrooms, right? Those were things that they couldn't do before. So it really opened up brand new worlds to what you could do with kids.
Yeah, so true. And two, just as an educator, like it opened us up to new ideas and new ways of thinking. I was looking back at some blog posts that I had written in 2010 to get ready to have this conversation. And one, I feel like I have gotten stupider in the past 14 years.
Not true.
I don't know. I read it and I'm like, who is that girl? She was so passionate. But just the conversations that we were having, and I have like 3 posts in a row from 2010 where I'm referencing an RSA Animate video. And I'm remembering like the fascination with RSA Animate at that, like it was so brand new and it was so novel, and they were taking something that could feel really dry, like a, conference, speech that somebody gave at a conference, and suddenly it like had all this life and meaning and nuance, and it was so cool. And, but the way that those like incidental things that were just popping up, like just really spurred on new thinking. I just was remembering like all of that was so, Sir Ken Robinson was a new name. He wasn't household yet. And it was like somebody else was seeing things from a similar perspective and talking about it on a pretty big stage. And it was just like, okay, well, I'm not alone. This is really cool.
Well, and look what that snowballed into also. There were things in that talk that Sir Ken Robinson gave that now we are like, oh yeah, that's what we do. And RSA Animate, like people started doing that as sketchnoting. That was for us, that was the original sketchnoters. And when you look at those things now, they don't seem all that innovative yet. They brought like a different way of thinking of things to us as educators that we could then in turn take to our students and say, you don't always have to do things exactly the same way. This way of taking notes that we've done for, however many years, you could do it differently. And, look at this one.
2-column note-taking, Michelle. How will they know 2-column note-taking?
Oh, my. The 5-paragraph essay. Oh, my. Yeah.
5-paragraph
But
essay.
all of those things, again, it was disrupting education in a good way. And I feel like we weren't jaded yet as to how social media has been able to do that to us now. But also I look at some people like, in my school, I was the only music teacher, and I did have PLCs with other music teachers in the district. But for some people, if they were in a small district, they might have been the only one of their kind. When I taught high school, I was the only vocal music director. So
I mean, that's speaking to me. I was the only one of my kind. I was the anomaly,
right?
Who
did you
computer
plan with?
Nerd girl?
Who did you talk
Nobody.
about? Right.
Myself.
And so when
I mean, it gave you the personal learning network. The PLN was like actual personal, like curated, built, and suddenly, you didn't feel alone anymore, which was so cool. Yeah.
That's what I loved. And it was, and I kind of had started that before I went back into teaching. So I was still the technology staff development. And I got to talk with Carl Fish, and I didn't even know Carl Fish. And I talked with you and just a lot of other people that were kind of helping me to feel heard, but also validated and affirmed, because the things that I was thinking, the direction that I thought we should be going educationally, maybe I didn't have people in person who always agreed with me, but I could find people that were online that were like, oh yeah, this is kind of a direction we need to be going, and we're not there yet, or we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
It definitely felt less lonely. It felt like you had people who, even if you didn't agree with everything that they said, you suddenly had people who were speaking enough of the same language that they challenged you in ways that were important and interesting, in different ways than just somebody who wasn't speaking this. Like, we're solving completely different problems here, which is what I found a lot in my school, and not because I wasn't surrounded by lovely people. They were all, I adored them all. It just, we were speaking vastly different language. We were seeing things differently. And I felt like an island most days.
Which, and again, it's not like you all have to have the same, like, we don't want an echo chamber. We don't want groupthink. But to be like you said, it felt very lonely, and to feel so isolated that you don't have anyone that you can really bounce ideas off. And that's really where a lot of that disruptive energy came from with Web 2.0. And I feel like I'm not sure that you would have started a school had you not been able to converse with people daily that had different ways of thinking.
I could not agree more. There was nothing in me, first of all, that even wanted to start a school. Like, I didn't want to be a principal. Like, I had no leadership. I didn't want to do that. And in fact, I had a gentleman out of Chicago named Michael Summers had contacted me out of the blue reading I Learned Technology, that blog, and said, you should start a school. I'd love to start a school with you in Chicago. And I was like, I would never do that. I would never do that, was my exact wording. And it kind of ended the conversation in some ways. I mean, we continued conversing and working together in other ways, but I had no desire to really start a school. I just wanted education to be better. And I was seeing the same things you were, from a different perspective, maybe at that moment, where I was seeing kids come into my space. And because I didn't have a curriculum that was scripted, that I was going, I could do kind of whatever I wanted. It was like the Wild West days then. And so I could kind of teach what I wanted to. And I was seeing these kids like so brilliant in their learning and in the way that they worked together and helped each other. And then I'd go in the teacher's lounge and they'd be talking about the same kid. And I'm like, we're not seeing the same child, right? Like, the kid you're seeing in the general classroom is not the kid who shows up to computer once a week. And so just this real disconnect. And again, I worked with amazing people. So it wasn't that, they were not great teachers or anything like that, but we were in the general classroom, it was a scripted curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so, even the school we were in gave some leeway and allowed me to go into the classroom and like integrate technology and things like that. Like there was room for creativity, and we were still using a very like one size fits all scripted curriculum. And so when I would go through that curriculum and work in the classrooms with teachers, it was like, oh, of course this isn't working for this kid. Like that's not who they are and that's not how they operate. And it's like, it doesn't see them, like you were saying, it sees students as like this homogeneous conglomerate. And we know that they're all unique individuals. And so it was like this real disconnect between what I knew to be true about these kids and then what was actually happening on a regular basis in the classroom. And it just felt like such a disservice. And that's when I started that Dreams of Education blog. Is I needed a new place. I didn't want to muddy my technology blog with random musings of education. And so I started Dreams of Education of like, just like, let's dream something better here. Again, not with the intention of starting a school or doing anything of that nature, but more just as a place to like dump my thoughts and reflect. And so, yeah, in 2010, if you had told me I was going to start a school in 2011, I would have laughed at you because I had no intention of doing that.
I have it's kind of a similar story. I feel like because I was teaching music, I definitely had standards and there was like a little bit of scope and sequence to a degree, but I had a lot of autonomy to get to those and make sure that the kids knew the standards or could perform whatever standard we had or skill. How I got there didn't really matter. So I had the freedom to be that artist as a teacher and get there that way. And I knew that that wasn't necessarily the same situation for my friends in the classroom. And I do remember a young boy, he was in 4th grade. He struggled in every situation of his classroom. And he came into my classroom and I was teaching world music drumming and a very complicated pattern. And he picked it up like that. And the look on his face was so different than the look I'd seen him come into the classroom with every other time, because he finally found something that he was really good at. And like his skill was impressive. The other kids were like, how does he know how to do that? And I felt really bad because his teacher did tell me later that he had just been beaming and he'd shared the story with her. But apparently that was the first time, I mean, this kid was in 4th grade, that he'd been successful at something in school. And I was like, how many of our kids?
Heartbreaking?
Oh, absolutely. How many of our kids walk through every single day never experiencing success because we don't necessarily give them opportunities to find what it is that they're really good at or something that they can get good at. And that I remember that feeling then. I was like, we are damaging kids by always focusing on their deficits. And I hate even calling it that because I don't believe that they have deficits. We only focus on the things that we see that are missing in them and not the things that they already have as strengths, because schools traditionally do not always value the things that some kids are good at. We
value a very narrow set
narrow
of knowledge and information.
Right. So when you're looking at that as the adult in the room, and how do you help kids see that again goes back to, this is not just so-and-so's class in such and such a school district. This kid had a name. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to, who knows, right? But that kid had a name, and that has stuck with me, for that many years, just because that was like 2010. That was a very meaningful part of my education as a teacher, to say, we need to do something better. We need to do better.
Yeah. So that reminds me of so this very story I'm sharing, you had the privilege of teaching this student later, which is kind of a full circle moment. But it was really that student as a 1st grader already feeling like he didn't belong in the classroom. Yeah. He he was seen as maybe a troublemaker, or like couldn't focus, like all of these labels that we give when we're trying to get them to do something that they are, one, shouldn't be doing, because developmentally it wasn't even appropriate really
Right.
for that age. A fairly like normal boy just being a boy, or just being a kid, like forget just being a child. Like
Right.
I'm not interested in this. It doesn't hold, like, it's not doing anything for me. I'm not going to put my attention to it. You know, it was that sort of a feeling. But then in my classroom would light up, and it wasn't because of something special I was doing. It was because he found the thing that he was successful at in my classroom and felt good about it and could be the expert, where in his other classroom, he was never the expert. He was the one who needed a helper, needed somebody to step in. But here's a first grader like coding and figuring out and knows how to navigate the computer really, really well, and was like the star of helping everyone else. And then when I would hear his gen ed teacher talking about him, I'm like, we've got two different kids. But it was because I was allowed to see him through the lens of the gifting and not, like you said, the deficit.
Right.
And he was really a catalyst of my thinking at the time of, we've got to see kids and their education differently. He was, I would say, the catalyst to like that light bulb in my head of something's got to be different here. Like, you can't have a genius not
Right.
believe they're a genius because you've put them in too narrow of a box. And yeah, I just remember thinking, like, this kid's going to be Da Vinci someday. Like, he's going to do something incredible someday, and we're going to miss it because we tried to get him to do something that wasn't appropriate for who he is.
Right.
Yeah.
You wrote a blog post about students with names. Can you just talk more about how, because I know that you'd written something about that before, and then you turned it into another, like an entirely different blog post as well. Do you have
I'm
any...
trying to remember.
I do remember reading it and thinking kind of the same line of thought I'd had, where we have these patterns that we get into, whether it's a large school district or a small school, where we constantly put kids in these little boxes. This one is the one who's quiet and always turns her work in time. And this is the one who causes, an outburst every day. But we give them, even if we don't do it intentionally, it's human nature, we do kind of pigeonhole them. And especially when you have a curriculum that is written that you have to follow before you even know the kids. I do remember colleagues of mine in other schools who would say that, I did all my lesson plans for the whole school year. And that was before they even had a student come in the classroom. And I said, how could you do that? You've not even met your kids yet.
Not only that, but my first teaching position, I was taking over for a teacher. And she literally had file cabinets that had by date what was going to happen. And it's what she had done for the previous 40 years. And she was a master teacher. Like, she was phenomenal. But, she leaves me this, like, and here's what you do. Like, it's already planned. And I remember thinking at that point, we had a lot of hard kids in that class who were being abused, and I knew were being abused. And fresh out of school, you're trying to teach a reading lesson and a kid comes up midway for a Band-Aid, and you're like, what could have possibly happened? We're sitting here reading, and she flashes you and it's a cigarette burn. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, how am I expected to pull out the next lesson and get them on standard and grade level, ready for the tests that come in third grade, when they're not even safe in their own, like, when we can't see who these kids are and we're not responding to who's actually in front of us. I think that's a lot of students with names came from that realization of, like, we all have histories that are unique to us. We have families that are unique. We have the natural gifts we, like, showed up in the world with that I don't know where it came from, but, like, I have an affinity for XYZ. We have like cultural things going around us that shape our worldview. We have all of these, like all of the world is in our classrooms at any given moment. It's all connected. And yet we're treating kids like they're this homogeneous group as if saying a first grader means something.
Right.
And it's like, well, what first grader are you talking about? Like, they have names, and with those names come histories and experiences and all of this like richness. And we like strip it all out and expect that they're all going to look the same. And I think it was Sir Ken Robinson in that video says like they have the same Best Buy date stamped on them. And it's like, yeah, why are we like, how is this what we decided to do? And I think it was best of intentions, right? We wanted to educate the masses. Industrial Revolution then comes and changes how we educate the masses and influences that. The Prussian system, like all of it influences like how that's kind of looking. But that we're, you know, at the time it was 2003 when I was first in the classroom. And I remember like, we haven't innovated beyond this. Like we're still doing this. This is still our best idea. And even when, you know, you watch all of the movies, all television, everything, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like any classroom that you picture looks identical. And then even when you watch something like The Jetsons and it's like the classroom of the future, it looks identical, except the teacher is now a robot. And it's like, that's really the best we can do. Like, that's our best idea.
I think there's a little bit to be said, too, that there's some contempt for children or youth that, this is a little bit of a darker turn, but stay with me here. I feel like there are a lot of adults who insist on more of an authoritarian nature when it comes to education, because we're going to they're going to comply and they have to do what we tell them to do. And that is not conducive to learning.
Yeah.
If you want them to do exactly what you want to do, sit in their seat, learn this, take a test, whatever, that's compliance. That's not necessarily
I was going to say
learning.
It's compliance and control,
it is.
right? And that's not the same.
But I do,
and success in that
exactly.
metric is so one-dimensional.
You don't get independent thinkers. You don't get critical thinkers who are following and obeying constantly. I mean, obviously, there has to be a societal norm where we agree that we're not going to just jump up and start screaming in the middle of a classroom experience where we're learning. But at the same time, we have to, like you said, that little person came up to you and needed a Band-Aid. And that there was a need for that. There was something that child needed. And I feel like we've really gotten away from looking at kids as individuals, as you said, with names. They all have different needs. Some of them are pretty big needs, and that's hard to completely supply as a school. However, if we ignore those needs, if we ignore those little people or big people and say, okay, you bring something to this table that is different. If I only want you to do exactly what the kid next to you is doing, I've completely ignored the fact that you are an individual and now your learning is done.
Yeah.
They're going to come into the classroom, do what they're told, and they leave, or they don't do what they're told and they're in trouble.
Right.
But we've created a situation that gets them in trouble.
Yeah. We created the circumstances,
Right.
the perfect circumstances for that to happen.
Yeah.
I was, I'm currently writing a book to kind of frame the curriculum I've been writing the last 13 years. But one of the things I was thinking a lot about is the way that the one size fits all curriculum assumes that we all have the perfect ingredients, being the child who is well-adjusted, who got enough sleep, who is well-fed, who, you know, is eager to learn and loves to do worksheets and loves to fill out. Like, it assumes we have these students. And the reality is, like, I've been in education 20 years and I've never had that student. And my guess is nobody's ever had that student because it doesn't exist. And that's coming from someone like both of us. We were really good at the game of school.
For sure.
But a lot of that was the pleaser in us, the perfectionistic tendencies, the wanting to not wanting to rock the boat, wanting to be invisible a little bit so that nobody was paying too much attention to our insecurities, maybe.
Right.
I mean, there was so much there that the perfect student, and I've shared a lot, like I left school feeling like a complete fraud because I could get the grade, I could do the thing, but I was playing the game. I wasn't learning. I wasn't, like, my heart wasn't changed. Nothing, nothing was different about how I saw the world, really. It was really about, well, I got the grade that everybody wanted me to get. And so that must be enough. Like, everybody's telling me that's enough.
Yeah.
And then cut to getting into, the universities of my choice and freaking out. I remember, like, crying on my bed over the summer on the way to college because I was convinced they were going to find out, like, I don't actually know trig. I could pass the test, but, like, I don't know what it's for. I don't know, all of those things were kind of playing in, and how many students, that's their story of they were good at school, but, like, practically that didn't necessarily translate into I can do something with this, or something's changed in me.
Right. For me, I had a really good memory, and school wasn't really hard. And then even once that, I took classes in high school that, made me apply learning, I still had some kind of framework within me that knew how to do that, or I had really good teachers who could help me get there. But I will say that because things were so easy for me early on, it made me very risk averse later. So if I didn't know how to do it.
Which is strange that you joined my school.
Well, that didn't feel as risky at the time, but we can get to that later.
We got to talk about why that is, because it still boggles me that two very risk averse people did a thing that was, from the outside, seems very risky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we reward students for things that they already know. And that was very much the case for me as a student. So I wore that, honor student or great student or whatever badge, like a badge of honor. And I didn't realize that not everybody was like me. For a long time, I really believed that they just didn't try, or they didn't want to, if they couldn't do as well as I did. And then as I got older and met more people, I got into education, had my own kids, I was like, oh, yeah, this is a little different. And so if that's the situation, how are we meeting the needs of kids who want to learn but aren't there yet? And that's how I became a teacher.
How often because of the constraints that we have in classrooms and have in curriculum and just have set up as part of our educational model, how many students have all the talent and ability and brilliance in the world who truly, I mean, we've met so many of them over the years, who truly believe that they are stupid, that they are not worthwhile, that they can't do it, because we have set up a system that if you don't look like this, they hear the same message as you heard of, like, well, they're just not trying hard enough.
Right. You
know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, there's so much that just as part of the model and the system that we built is just damaging in unintended ways. I don't believe it's ever intentional. I think it's all unintentional, but there's a lot of unintended consequences that are happening pretty regularly.
Grading is a perfect example of being penalized for not knowing it quickly, learning over time. And then you look at different grading practices. And I know that's, Ken O'Connor, grading for learning. You talk about that's been around for what? 12, 15 years? At least. And you think that people are still averaging grades or weighting grades in different ways. And I'm like, okay, is this the true picture of what the kid knows and is able to do? Or is that math disguising that they didn't know it early on, but they eventually did learn it? And I think that's something else that we'll talk about as we go through this series of podcasts.
Oh, for sure.
That's just a practice that it's antiquated. And is it really serving the needs of the kid who is the learner, or is it serving the needs of a school or a district or whatever it may be of having to show that we're ranking kids?
Is it, who is it serving and who is it easiest for? Right. which is interesting. This conversation, like the last, 10 minutes, has just put me back into our tweeting days when we would just like rapid fire back and forth on these kind of topics. As kind of our brains, it seems like we're evolving in similar directions. And I think it was happening certainly with the people we surrounded ourselves with on Twitter. Those conversations were pretty regular. And so it felt more normal. And then you'd go and have them, or at least I would go have them back with my school. And they looked at me like I was speaking in tongues. Like it was like a completely foreign concept. And it was just like the pat on the head, like, yeah, how nice it must be to be so innocent and sweet and naive, to think that could happen or that change could happen. It was very, like I said, I worked with amazing people. I love them all, but it was very like, you sweet, naive baby, like you just don't know how this works yet.
Right.
And so it was so nice to have that group of people who were like, no, we see it too. We see it too. And I just think we fell into a group of humans through blogs and Twitter and online spaces that were thinking in those ways. And part of that was the technology, right? We were like early adopters on a lot of things, which, allowed for conversations that might not have happened in a different group of humans.
We had access to people that were considered leaders in innovation, and people who would push the status quo and say, this maybe isn't, or push at the status quo, I should say. This isn't just because we've always done it. It's the danger of we've always done it this way, right?
Yeah.
And they were willing to kind of step up, and quite a few of them within their own schools were taking things in different directions to show they were taking the risks. Like I think about, Chris Lehman and Diana Laufenberg at SLA in Philadelphia and Science Leadership Academy, and how they were saying, oh yeah, we've been doing this and here's how we're doing it. Hey, come see our school. We're going to start something called EduCon, and come see our school so you can see that this does work for kids. So they did there were lots of those people who were taking even like small risks of having, we're just going to try this one thing in our school. And maybe it's something like Identity Day or Genius Hour or something like that. And we're going to start small, but we're going to give kids some freedom and some choice. And oh my gosh, look what happened. How great was it? Yeah.
I also was remembering, like, early in my blogging days, I stumbled across, I think my mother-in-law sent it to me, actually, Jen Wagner's blog, TechnoSpud. And it was so meaningful to me because I was a tech teacher who had never taught computer, who had never taught tech, didn't really know what I was doing. But to find this person who was innovating in real time and sharing it was so just incredible to me. And then I started my blog actually because my husband was roasting me because I was writing down URLs in a spiral notebook and writing notes about how I was going to use it with kids. And he's like, you're a tech teacher using spiral notebooks for your URLs. So it was him that was like, you should start a blog so at least you could go back and search it by keywords. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And he's like, well, you should because you're a tech teacher. So that was probably, I don't know, 2004 or 5, somewhere in there. So that's when I started I Learned Technology. It was really for myself of like, how do I keep track of this? Not realizing until Twitter came on the scene and I would like share blog posts or share resources or whatever that people were reading it. And I remember seeing, I think it was Jen put on her blog, or maybe it was like the Oreo project or one of the projects that she did, one of those widgets that showed where in the world people were coming from and how many. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So without knowing anything, I plopped this thing on my blog and, just let it go. And lo and behold, like people all over the world are reading the thing, and I had no idea. Like I thought I was doing it for me, and as it turns out, like other people cared, and I didn't, people didn't comment, so I had no concept of other people were actually like reading this or caring that I was posting every day. But that's how I found a lot of my tribe was when I got on Twitter and realized like, oh, I can follow this amazing person, Jen Wagner, on Twitter and like have access to her in a way that I didn't feel like I had access to her through her blog, although I'm sure if I had commented, she would have responded. But it felt so cool to be able to like connect with these like truly amazing thought leaders in education who were doing incredible things and even some who had books and different things. And that was really why I started the Blog Alliance on I Learn Technology, was because I was like, there's probably other people blogging who don't realize they have an audience. And if we can all comment on each other's things. But the beauty that came out of that for me was then connecting with even more educators in very purposeful ways where I'm reading their blogs on a daily basis and commenting on every post and sharing it out to my network, and they're doing the same with me. The way that amplified kind of my thinking cannot be overstated, because it introduced me to people like Edna Saxon and Maggie McCosgreen and some of these folks just doing incredible things around the world in inquiry-based classrooms and these different kind of methodologies that it was probably a blurb in my university curriculum, but nothing that we spent any amount of time like really understanding nor could I just go somewhere and see it until like the EduCons and the places where people were doing this work. And it was suddenly like, oh, okay, well, and it's not a one-off thought that somebody's having. This is happening worldwide in pockets. And really incredible things are happening. And now that's who my people are, right? And right. I think about they say you're in a mix of the 6 people you spend the most time with. And suddenly we were surrounded by amazing humans in education doing amazing things. And like our 6 people really transformed how we were thinking around education, which was so cool.
I think I was going to ISTE before it was called ISTE. It was called NEC, N-E-C-C.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember what the acronym stands for.
I don't remember either.
Computing, National Education and Computing Conference or something like that.
Oh, look at you.
I think that was it. And they started opening up the Bloggers Cafe. So I had started a blog, I had some like anonymous blogs for a while that were just personal things. I was just kind of goofing around because my kids were doing that, my own children. And then Tony Vincent was working in my school district and he was blogging with his students. So I was like, okay, I can try this. And he said, yeah, try this platform. So I kind of noodled around for a while. And then Avenue for Learning came out from that, because I was thinking, this is where I'm putting my thoughts out, whether I get feedback or not. Feedback is always great. But even if I don't, it helps me kind of take those thinking processes and see them visually on a page and put it out there, expecting maybe I'll get some feedback, because you write differently when you think you might have an audience, even if you don't. You write differently, right? So I remember doing that, and for some of it, I was maybe complaining a little bit too much, and then other times I was like, oh, this is how I really feel about these things. And it was interesting to hear from people, like you said, in our kind of little blogosphere and from Twitter, who had either similar thoughts, or they would kind of push me and say, do you really feel that way? Or are you a little jaded right now about this particular incident or whatever it was? And it was really great to be in a place where I felt like those were the like really good professional conversations, but I do believe it stretched me as a learner, but also as a teacher. And so I feel like a lot of that, then to go meet those people in person at ISTE was just like, oh, wow, it's
so cool.
There was a little bit of like celebrity kind of at first.
Totally.
I mean, I remember we were like, oh, you're the prom king and queen of ISTE. And then I was like, okay, this is just weird. We should not do this. But then after like just introducing myself, I remember when I just walked up to like Dean Sharesky and I was like, hey, hi, or Scott McLeod and say, hey, I'm Michelle.
Yeah.
I follow you on Twitter and blah, blah, blah. And it was a weird way to introduce yourself, but also
but that's how we met each other in person.
And it was also, how are we connected? So it's not just like,
how do we know each other?
Exactly. And so I didn't feel weird when people introduced themselves to me like that. And so you and I had like a very, very surface level of, I read your stuff and stuff.
I wouldn't say we knew each other well, even through Twitter. Because that was ISTE 2010, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That we met in person.
Yeah.
And it was because we knew the same people.
Right.
And we knew the same people better than we knew each other.
Right.
And we happened to go to lunch together.
Yeah. And everyone's like, you know each other now? I'm like, well, yeah, it's those early days of Twitter and blogs when you would say you knew someone, everybody else was like, well, you don't really know them. And I'm like, I probably know them better than I know you.
Totally. Yeah. And I was thinking, as you were talking about the blogging and that reflection piece too, how much writing tells you what you think. It uncovers what you really believe and what you really think. And so it's been fun going back through some of those early blogs and like, what was influencing me? What was I thinking? It was also a time where you were hearing stories in the like everyday atmosphere of people who weren't your traditional amazing student who went on to do something amazing, started Apple out of the garage, or, you were hearing these stories of like people dropping out or people who didn't have your traditional typical like success story path of I did all the right things in school. I got into the best university. And then I got this amazing job where I climbed up the ladder. Like you were suddenly hearing stories of people who were like, yeah, that's not the game I was playing. Like I decided that wasn't working for me. And so I did it this way. And I feel like there was a lot of that, just like books were coming out, you were hearing more about that, or maybe that's just my perception. I don't know. But it kind of enabled me at 26, 27 to start thinking like, well, yeah, it's always been done. Like I've been told this is how it's done, but clearly this isn't the only way it's done. And in my own family, that's not how it was done. You know what I mean? So it was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the way it has to be. It just, I think it gave different permission to question how this is just the status quo. And then to have all those stories, to have these like educators surrounding us that are doing incredible things. Like it was just, there was something that felt like it was just in the atmosphere all at the right time to make it possible to like dream differently.
Right. And we could see, like you could go physically visit, or you could read about or Skype in to a class or whatever, little pockets of innovation. So they maybe weren't, because it's really easy to say, I'm starting from scratch and I'm building this whole thing and everything's going to be different, versus I'm already in a system that's telling me what I have to do, but here's how I'm going to make this innovative. And innovation isn't always a good thing, but maybe if I'm trying something and it's working with my kids, that I know this is something that I should continue to do because I see it working in a different and better way for the students that I have. So I feel like we had exposure to that. And, there were a lot of things happening at that time as well, where people weren't necessarily afraid. Like there was more permission to try something new in certain circumstances. I think we just kind of were in that a little bit of a golden era of let's think of something different and try it out.
Yeah. I always am like, was it really golden or was my brain more golden? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, was it really different? And I keep coming back to, I think there was the right set of things all happening at the same time that like created the conditions that it could work. Even down to like this pre-iPhone, right? We all had the same razors, or we all had the same Blackberries or whatever. And so my husband was in the phone skin business where they'd make custom phone skins for, your device so that you could identify. And so you could upload a picture, or you could make your own custom whatever. And it was basically it was a sticker, right, that got stuck to your, but it's thinking like, if we can personalize our dang cell phone covers, like if we can everything was about personalization. We were personalizing music with Pandora. We were personalizing like all these different experiences. And it was, again, all of these things kind of happening at once, and like that, just the right conditions where, one, I feel like there was enough technology, there was enough just support in unexpected ways of that human capital. I remember Shirley Terrell and Cybrary Man Jerry saying, we should totally start a Twitter academy of all of these teachers and like have this place where all of this brilliance is in one place. And I remember folks coming in and kind of arguing like, no, we need all of us to be spread out, like infiltrating in all these different places. But there was just something to the belief that it could happen. There was enough supports that it could happen. And then I too went through, when I had left the classroom for health reasons, and kind of was like, well, where is my place now that I'm not in the classroom? But I still care about all of these things. I'm still having these conversations, like all of those pieces. What does that look like now? And I was still working with schools on integrating technology. I was kind of coming up with these tech plans that could supplement the technology to help maybe see kids better in their learning. But that was right when, Pandora was new. I was listening to it one day. A song came on by an artist I had never heard of. I'm like geeking out and looking for something to write down this artist so I don't forget her name. And I just am like creating this tech guide going, okay, we can do this for music. Music feels really personal. Why can't we do this for learning? And I was consulting with some app developers at the time that were developing educational apps. And so they were asking me, from an educator's perspective, like, is this thing we're building worthwhile? I was, giving feedback and whatever. But I remember reaching out to Ian Chia in Australia and saying, Ian, I have this idea. Has tech come far enough that we could pull off something like this? And I'll never forget it because he was so encouraging. He said, if you can dream it up, like, we can code anything. And it was like, what? We can? Like, we can just do that? And so that's where I started he's like, dig into the back end of Pandora, see how it works, and see if you could figure out how that could work for learning. And come to find out, it's called the Music Genome Project. And they, based it on the Human Genome Project, which identifies genes in DNA. And so then it was like, well, they're looking for the genes in music. And if we tag music with these different attributes, and I'm like, well, learning's got attributes. Could we do? So my evolution was really kind of accidental, but based on like those right conditions. Of thinking like we could see kids, like could we empower teachers differently to really see kids in their education and find that just right thing for the kid in the right moment, like those serendipitous moments that I see happen in classrooms all the time, but it just happens, by accident almost. It's not always intentional, but what if we could make it intentional? And so, yeah, it was really like coming up with that idea and kind of following it a little bit and talking about it and blogging about it and just, connecting with folks. And that led to starting a school. It was truly that blog post. I think that blog post is called When Hunches Collide. And it was based on a Steven Johnson RSA video where he was talking about salons and the different ideas like colliding when people come together. And here we had it with Twitter, with blogs, with, these conferences where we were getting together and doing things together. And those conditions were just right. But then a family that I had taught their kids read one of those blog posts or saw a tweet or something and reached out to me out of the blue and said, hey, I heard you're starting a school. And I think I laughed and laughed and laughed because who started that rumor? No. And she's like, well, I read it somewhere. I think it was on your blog. And I'm like, when did I write about starting a school? I'm wondering if she saw something about like a Twit Academy or I don't know. But we got together over their spring break in March 2011, and I met with them and another family of kids I had taught. And we just caught up, and I downloaded like what I thought schools could look like and should look like, that we could do it better. And at the end, both sets kind of sat back and said, well, I don't care if this is in our basement, but our kids are going here, so we need you to figure it out. And that was March 2011. And August 2011, we opened up
a school.
We had a school. But in between March and I would say April, when we got our 501c3 or applied for our 501c3, there was a lot of still, I didn't think I was really going to do this, but it was a thought experiment of talking about what if this happened on Twitter, and kind of sharing, not expecting that it was going to happen, but like a what if. And I remember I think you DM'd me and said, if this really happens,
if you build it, I will come. Yep, I did.
You might have no, that was probably before the Field of Dreams gifts were available to us.
Maybe.
But I remember going then to Matthew, who I had worked with, and he had just got his administrative license. And so it was like we were having these conversations. He was somebody in the school that I worked at that we had those conversations pretty often. And he was the one who didn't look at me like I was completely nuts. And so I was like, well, would you come on as the administrator? Like, do you want to put that administration degree to work? And he was like, I think we could do it. And it was just enough of people who were in my inner circle saying, I think you could do it. Meaning like the people in real life surrounding me, my husband, like, yeah, try it. People like Matthew, people, like these parents who were like, we'll send our kids there, and they made up our first, how many? 8 kids?
I think something
between
like that.
The two of them.
Yeah.
So we had just enough of this like momentum in person saying, no, I think this could work. And then I had all of this momentum from folks like you and Jerry and Shelley and people just talk that I had surrounded that are like, you should do this. That it made me believe that maybe I could do it, which when I look back and think about the sweet baby 28-year-old Kelly, I'm like, who on earth saw me and was like, you could do this? And so that's my question for you, Michelle. On what planet did you think that I could pull this off?
So we talked earlier about both of us being risk averse, right?
Yeah.
So you had the right conditions and you felt supported, right?
Yes.
For me, I already knew that I was leaving the school, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do for a job. I'll probably just teach voice lessons until I figure something out. I'd worked in tech companies before in other schools, so I wasn't really too worried. And my husband had his business, and so we were pretty okay financially. And also, my youngest daughter was just about to graduate from high school, so I wasn't that was a lot of things lining up to say, okay, the risk isn't as great. But I also felt like, so I need to do something that I really believe in, because I'm having a hard time. I often get told this by my husband or therapists or whatever, that you don't have to like hold on to your principles so tightly that it's now limiting what you do. But there are things that I feel so strongly about and passionately about that I have a really hard time going back. And as I watched kids become more and more dispirited with the game of school, I was like, I cannot be a part of this anymore. And again, I am not throwing shade at other schools. People do what they do because of the constraints that they're in. I just didn't feel like I could live in that anymore. And I know that sounds like, super heady and a little on the altruistic side, but it was kind of sucking the life out of me. And I'm not that person.
Well, and once you see, you can't unsee.
Exactly.
And so that makes it really hard once you know it can be, once you've been to an educon, once you've once you've seen the glory, and then you're like, well, I can't unsee this now.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I grew up with entrepreneurial parents. And so in some ways, like doing something on my own doesn't feel risky to me because it was what I grew up with. It was like, we just had an idea, you know, my dad would have an idea and it was like, well, let's start a new company.
Right.
And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but like, okay, well then we'll pivot and do something else. Like that was kind of the home life I had. So it was at odds with the school experience that I had, in interesting ways. Cause I think both of those things shape how I think and what feels scary versus not. But the starting something new and doing, like going out on my own, didn't feel particularly risky when it probably would have to other people. One, because of the supports. But two, at that moment, because we were having so many of these conversations, it was so saturated and like I couldn't unsee it.
Right.
It felt riskier to keep doing what we were doing rather than to try something new.
That is spot on. That is exactly. I felt like if I continue to do this, I'm going to get lost. My own personality, my own individuality, I will get lost. But I will also be contributing. I really saw my youngest daughter, especially. All four of our kids had very different experiences all through school. But my youngest daughter, she has so many gifts that were not valued at school. We talked about that earlier. But
I think we talked about that in your interview.
Yeah, for sure, because she always thought she was the dumb kid, and she is not dumb. She is highly intelligent. She's also highly empathetic, and she can read a room like most people. You're like, oh wow, you've got that spot on. But I felt like she wasn't valued, and because of that, even now, she's 31 years old, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm the dumb, I'm the ditz. I'm like, no, you're not. You just weren't valued for the things that you have, and your intelligence looks different than the game of school shows you. So I remember, you're talking about starting it. I say, yes, I'm all in. I talk with my husband. He's like, oh, darn, we get to move to Colorado. Sure, let's do it. And he fortunately is an IT professional, and he could find a job pretty much anywhere. So it seemed like a really good time for us to make that shift. And I didn't feel like it was, I was definitely a little hesitant in certain ways. And I'm sure that came off. Usually I come off as a little bit cold or unfeeling when I'm nervous about something. But all I know is as soon as I met the families, and I'm like, oh, I get to teach these kids. And that was, and again, just, we'll talk about class size at some point, but knowing that I didn't have to learn 400 people and try to meet the needs of 400 people, right?
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It was instantly, we started off really ensuring that we had a culture that valued community. I like community better than the word family. Family has a little bit of baggage that comes with it sometimes.
Sure.
But it definitely felt like a community, and we were intentional about making sure we kept that feeling. I don't think that we could have been successful for as long as we were if people didn't say, I feel like I can be myself here. And how many kids over the years have come back and told us that very thing?
Yeah. And two, it was funny that first year that we started, I was remembering how often we defined ourselves in those early days by what we weren't. Right. So it was like, we're the no test, no homework, no grades, like it was all the things we weren't. And it was really the kids that first year who identified us, and I think correctly, by what we were. And the words that they have used since day one were freedom and like it feels like family here, and the freedom they identified like from the get-go, which is really cool because I think we identified ourselves by what we weren't for a long time, and probably that was we were leaving something and we wanted to differentiate ourselves, but they always did based on who we were, which was really cool.
I like the posters that we had after that first year where we had a picture of the kid and then a little bit of their writing. And they said, I'm creative, I'm a writer, I'm a friend, and just saying who they were. and who we are as a community. That I think was really, was brilliant marketing, but also it was authentic.
Yes. And we kind of stumbled on those things by accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that we had like a marketing team. In fact, going back to, post your DM to me, and then I remember reaching out and saying, I think it's really happening. Like we just got a 501c3. Like I'm putting together job descriptions. I think this is happening. We did not start with any backing of any kind. We had no money. I think I used like 60 of my own dollars to get us a URL and, print flyers that we put up in the community. But so even when I hired you, I was so nervous when you came out to look for houses because I had no money to pay. Like I had no guarantees. I knew kind of as we were budgeting, we knew we had to have 54 students to start and make it like financially viable. And we knew that I was very insistent, and I think it's because of where we came from, that we be based on per pupil expenditure in the public school, because I wanted to show that the model was viable, not because we were a private school that had gobs and gobs of money or access to different things. I wanted to really show like this is possible, but we have to value things differently. And I didn't know if we'd be able to tell that story, but that was the intent. And I think we did tell that story well up until this year, when chaos ensued. But we really started when I hired you officially and gave you an offer letter. I think the offer letter had an asterisk like when we get to 54 students.
Right.
And I think when you came out to look at houses, we were still only like 26, 27 enrolled. And, but I remember like bringing you to, did we have the building by then? Do you remember? Did we know where we were going to be yet?
I think so. Because where I ended up choosing to live was just right up the street.
Was based on, yeah. Okay. So I think I brought you, my memory is on that trip, I brought you to see the space, and it was very not traditional space.
No.
It had like a stage in the classroom. We were going to have 3 classes in one space, which now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we survive all of this? But, yeah, doing all of the things. And, I just opened, sorry, I accidentally somehow opened something that I didn't intend to open.
Oh.
So just seeing the space, and then we went and had lunch, and there was this place in town that is no longer there, but I think they made it a new restaurant that it still has all the same decor. But it was called Beatrice and Woodsley, and I'm like, we got to go get a drink at Beatrice and Woodsley so you can see this bar. And you're like, okay, it's going to be like every other bar, but isn't it cool? I'm going to post the picture so people could see, because we have a selfie that we took at this bar, and it's hard to get the context, but I'll put it in show notes or something. But essentially you're in this like birchwood forest. The bar shelves are all held up by, there's like chainsaws going into the wall, and that's what the shelves are on. And the bathroom is like a puzzle. It's so cool. So anyway, I brought you there because I was like, this is what I want school to feel like. This is what the classrooms should feel like. And you're like, this is pretty cool. So, but that trip, I remember feeling so much imposter syndrome. One, because you'd been in education quite a bit longer than I had, and I felt like you knew how to be an educator. And I was, and here I am like, starting this thing. I don't know if it's going to work. We don't really have enough students yet. I give you, you're moving here, and I'm like, what if it doesn't work? And you're like, if it doesn't work, we get to live in Colorado for a little while. Like, right? You were so gracious. But you made it feel okay if it didn't work out. And I think I remember having the conversation with you at Beatrice and Woodsley of like, if it doesn't work out, we'll all just go back to our lives the way they were 6 months ago.
Right. There were levels of risk, but it felt safer. It also felt like at the time that it was new and exciting, and I hadn't done anything like that for a while, and was actually ready for it. And again, as I said before, I knew I wasn't staying in my other position. So either I looked around and found something to do back when we were in Nebraska, or we moved to Colorado and start over and, oh yeah, I get to go hiking on the weekends too. So it was a win-win for us. But also like, I know that I knew then if I had hesitated and said, I can't take that risk, I would have kicked myself for years, because the potential to be in something that it just felt right. Like, I know we're going to do the right things for kids. I know I'm excited about teaching again. I know that I'm with people who not only share, the same philosophy of education as I do, but even if we aren't exactly like, because we obviously aren't, I feel like our strengths all kind of like melded in, and we were this kind of like a puzzle that we were putting together with all of these different disparate pieces. And I knew, like I said, if I didn't get in on that, I would have regretted it so much. That part felt riskier than jumping in with both feet.
Yeah. So the way that we managed to pay you the first month was we took everybody who enrolled, we had a $500 enrollment fee that we took to hold the spot. And that was pretty common. We knew that from other schools in the area that most people start with seed money or with a grant or something. They've got something. We started literally at zero. Yeah, something. But I kind of love that part of our story because it does show it's not, the constraints aren't usually what we think they are.
Right.
The constraints are usually end up different than what we think they're going to be. So by getting that enrollment deposit, when we hit 54, we knew that we could pay teachers for the first 2 months, and we knew that we could pay for the building we were in, where we were leasing space. And so then, as tuition payments come, it makes the whole budget work.
Right.
But we started scrappy, right? We didn't start with all the furniture in the world, all the, it was like we were really choosy. My mother-in-law was just leaving the classroom. And so as educators do, she had many years of hoarding manipulatives and different things. And so a lot of our books and our manipulatives came from her collection that first year. And we, went to IKEA together, and thankfully there was a new IKEA in Colorado, and we could go buy things, make them mobile, and because everything had to be mobile, which maybe we'll talk about kind of our setup and how we made that first year work in truly like lean mobile conditions, which I actually think in 2020 and this last year was to our benefit that we had that knowledge, because we knew we could do it. It's not ideal, but we knew we could be flexible and agile, and it doesn't have to look the way it looks everywhere else. So I think that might be a good place to like pick up the next time, like what that first year looked like and how we One of the things I loved is from the beginning, because none of us were experts in starting a school, none of us had done it before, we were all figuring it out together. And that's a place where I think my age was of service to me. I didn't feel like the expert, so I didn't feel like I needed to act like the expert. Which, when you're starting something like that collaborative nature, sometimes when you're the expert, you're like, well, this is the way it's going to go, and that's just the way. And we didn't really have that because we were all doing it together and figuring it out together.
The people that started the school together, including the families, there were just a lot of people that were very gracious and left ego at the door and came in and said, hey, how can we make this work together? If something wasn't working, we were able to say, okay, let's pivot. And how
we did a lot of pivots.
Yeah. And how important that is. And, you said before about having the flexibility and to be agile. I feel like there's so much rigidity in schools. Again, just because it's looked the same for so long that we didn't have any of that as an expectation. So yeah, I think that's a really good place to pick up next time, and just really to just discuss what were some of the key factors that made us maybe blissfully unaware, but also because of that and not expecting to like, well, I've been here so long that this is how it's got to be. It was really, there was you and Matthew gave us so much great leadership, but also so much autonomy that we did feel like we were part of a team. And I think that I really, truly believe that's why it worked.
Yeah. I think there's something to like the willful naivety in the beginning of, that you don't know everything, but you like lean into it a little bit. It's funny because, over 14 years, a lot of people have come to us and they're like, we want to start a school. We want to do this and that. And it's always funny to me that how much watching their process makes me like, oh, we had no business starting a school because, they're talking about business plan. Here's, will you read my business plan? And I'm like, I've never written a business plan in my life. Like there were all these things that we just didn't know to do. And some of that freedom from the constraint, I think, was our greatest asset, especially in the early days of forming. We literally were starting from nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then we got to make decisions of what furniture we were going to bring back in, rather than assuming we had to exist within these constraints and then make it work within those constraints.
It made us very resourceful.
Yeah.
And just how we thought about even, gosh, we really could just go walk to a library today. We didn't have to have that already planned and on the schedule. I mean, there were so many different ways that we were able, and again, we had great families who were who put their trust in us and said, I know that you have our kids' best interest in mind, and meant it. And like how I know that takes a lot. As a parent, I know that takes a lot. But I think that they also gave us a lot of the freedom to do the things that we did, that we wouldn't necessarily have given ourselves permission to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, and I think Matthew is the one who first said it, but if we do what everyone else is doing, we become what everyone else has become. And it was like, okay, well, what happens when that's not when that's not how we set things up? Right. What if we look at it completely different? And there was a lot of playfulness in those early days. Like I'll never forget our first staff meeting at Rio, all of us having a margarita and 2 margaritas deep. And suddenly it's like, did we all just become best friends? Like Morgan just crying and just realizing like, oh, we're doing this thing together and we're in this together. And like, we're excited to figure it out together. Without feeling like it has to look a certain way. And I think that's what keeps us from doing new things in education so often is we think it has to look a certain way, or our assumption is that we have a constraint that is necessary instead of questioning, like, why do we do that? Right. Is that necessary? Where, again, we were describing ourselves a lot by what we weren't that year. But in some ways, it was kind of nice because it was forcing us to remember what we were not doing purposefully.
Right. We're intentional about not doing this. And even looking, as a team, there was no competition. Like nobody was, vying for being the best teacher of the group. And because of that, we shared, hey, what's working? Or, oh my gosh, this is not working. What should I do? That was really refreshing to be in a situation where I didn't feel like I had to pretend like I had all the answers. I could walk in and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Or, hey, this really worked today. Anybody else want to try it?
Which was nice for me too, because I could walk in and authentically say, like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how this is going to work, or should we try this? Or, but we all had that like playful, there was a sense of like childlike play to it as well. That first year of like, I don't know, let's try it. Let's see if it works. Who's stopping it? Matthew would always be like, we get to make the rules. Who's stopping us? It was like, we can do whatever we want. And it was like, we can do whatever we want, in a lot of ways, like we can do whatever we want. We get to be the ones who decide what this looks like. And that freedom from feeling like it needed to look a certain way, and parents giving us that freedom was such a gift, because we've had years where that we didn't have that freedom, and it makes it harder. Right. That climb is a lot harder. So yeah, those early parents, they put a lot of trust in something. We didn't know what we were doing. And but they saw, it's one of those things when you see your kids come alive again, you're like, okay, I don't know why it's working, but we're going to stick with it.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, because that spilled over into the kids. We can talk at some point how long it took us to help get kids who'd already played the game of school out of that, and how hard that was. But eventually what we saw was they took our lead. They saw us admitting when we didn't know something, or working as a team, or that playfulness, and that carried over into their learning. And those are I have so many of those stories that I can't wait to share, because that really is where we look at what did we do extremely well. And that's what we saw in the kids.
Yeah. And the things that didn't go well, I think even shaped us in really important ways.
Absolutely.
And some of that intuition that I was talking about at the beginning is what made it all work. Was we were all tapped into the intuition of, this isn't working for this kid, or right. We hit on something here.
Right.
And really paying attention to that in ways that I'm not sure I don't know if permission is the right word, but I didn't have as much freedom to tap into the intuition, because it was like, well, we're using this curriculum that's research-based, that's backed in XYZ, and, you just sat through 18 hours of professional development on it, and this is what we're doing, kind of thing, right? So even if intuitively you knew like it wasn't working for a student, you didn't necessarily feel like you had the freedom to listen to that intuition and do something different, because the fear of what if it doesn't work, and, all that comes with that. Right. But I'm excited to share those stories too, because we've got so many of the good and the bad. And in the interest of sharing, that's what we want to do with this podcast, is just share what we've learned and the resources we've come across, and the lessons and what not to do. And we've got plenty of all of them. So I think we should call it. Do you feel good?
I feel good.
Okay. Before we do, I thought it would be fun to, again, time travel in our minds. And can you remember either some books or movies or TED Talks or something that was happening in the 2010, 2011 that was influencing your thinking in some way?
I read Clay Shirky's Here Comes Everyone, which is so serendipitous, because I just brought it downstairs to my office.
I need to do that one again.
Yeah.
It's been a minute since I've read that one.
I can look back now at it and go, okay, yeah, maybe not so. But at the time, it was like, oh yeah, there is like this fire hose of people whose voices you're going to hear. And I remember thinking then, everything is going to change from how we grew up, and even for my kids, because, I said my youngest had graduated in 2011, and what education was for them compared to what it is now, or even for any of the students that we've had, it looks very different. Their world is very different. So I remember thinking it didn't, I wouldn't say it caused a shift in my thinking, but it was just another layer of, this is different and we need to react to this.
Yep.
But also be proactive in that we're not chasing something, and leaving these kids behind. So there was that. I can't even list all the blogs that I was reading back then.
I know, so many. I have lists somewhere. Like in my blogs, I have lists of who I was, because I was trying to share, like, this is influencing my thinking. There's a lot of people in our biographies.
Yeah. Well, Carl,
in our biography and bibliographies.
Carl Fish and Scott McCloud had created
Shift Happens.
Shift Happens. I had used that even before I went back into the classroom. I was helping school leaders, and that was, Scott's forte also. But to talk to them saying there is a sizable shift happening right now. That's something we've talked about this whole entire episode, but we have to be able to look at this and say things have to change because these kids are not growing up in the same world that we grew up in. My oldest daughter went to university, and by the time she finished, the job that she was looking to go to didn't exist when she started university.
Yep.
So within less than a 4-year time period, there was no such thing as a brand marketer or manager. And that's where she was that's not what she does, but that's kind of where she was aiming at some point. But it didn't even exist when she was a college freshman. So we kept talking about how we need to prepare kids differently because we're not shifting them into a career. We need to make sure that they have life skills and learning experience and how to learn. And is it Alvin Toffler? That's the how to learn, unlearn, relearn, whatever that quote is. But yeah, all of that was kind of coming into play for us right as our school was starting.
Well, I was remembering Alfie Cohen's The Homework Myth. I was reading a lot of Seth Godin, particularly Linchpin, which I think there's something to when you're doing the hard thing, reading the You Can Do It book.
Right.
And Linchpin was definitely that. What part are you going to be here? How are you going to play? So that was one of them. A Whole New Mind. I think I was reading at that time. And then, of course, Finding Your Element, Sir Ken Robinson. And I don't think I had read Steven Johnson at that point. I think I had just seen the RSA Animate based on kind of his ideas and his thinking. And it really... that video, it's like a 10-minute video, but really changed a lot of my thinking with those other inputs. And Shift Happens was a big one for me too. And I, always loved that Carl was right down the street from me. And in all of these local conferences that were put on, it was always fun to collide with thinkers that were doing it felt like really big things.
Right. I was reading David Warlick, and I'd met him at a Midwest conference.
Oh, David Warlick. How I love that man.
Yeah, and just all of the different ways that he was thinking. And Kathy Schrock was putting together all of these great websites and helping teachers to find tools and giving her opinion on things. And here's how I would use it if I were doing this. And just people were just so willing to help and provide.
Oh, John Spencer. Yeah. That was when he was doing his blog. What was that called? I don't think it's still live, but it was satirical about people Pencil. Were so kind of down. Yeah. What was it called? Something about a pencil.
He did Pencil Chat on Twitter.
Yeah, it preceded Pencil Chat because it was a blog that you could subscribe to, and he would tell the story, but it was, the idea was this Luddite, but back when pencils were replacing chalk.
Yeah.
And the conversations of what if, a kid could stab somebody else's eye? Then what are you going to, it was all the dangers. It was mirroring the conversations we were having about the dangers of technology. And he was doing this satire. And I loved it.
So funny. Yeah. We have a lot of people to credit and have to put that into a fun bibliography for the podcast.
I know there needs to be they have become part of our biography, but they need to be, the bibliography of how we got to now.
Right.
Would be fun to look back on. But I'm excited to do this and remember all of these stories, and maybe we'll find a photo or a few photos each episode that we can share from that time. And we'll see how the cameras in our phones change. They start out looking real blurry.
A little grainy.
but just to walk down that memory lane too, and invite people on that journey with us. But yeah, if nobody listens but you and I, it'll be nice to have the record. And I'm hoping it'll be similar to blogging in that it helps kind of shape our thinking around where we've been and where we're headed. So
I like it.
Cool.
It's on.
All right. Well, onward. Hey, Michelle, where else can people find you online?
I blog at avenue4learning.com, and the 4 is the actual number 4, not the word 4, avenue4learning.com.
And you can find me at dreamsofeducation.wordpress.com, which is my original blog. You can also find me at ktsplace.com, which is where I share a bunch of resources and kind of projects that we're currently working on. And we are both on Blue Sky at the moment, but not as active as we once were on our favorite bird. Come find us and connect with us in other places, and we look forward to connecting with you.